Okay. All right. Welcome to the Kaiju Transmissions podcast once again. My name is Kyle Byrd, and I'm joined today with my friend, my co-host for the day, Kevin.
Hello.
And we're back with a very special guest, Mr. Ray Morton, author of the book King Kong, The History of a Movie Icon. We had Ray on about 5 years ago just to kind of just see what he's been up to and get some of his thoughts on this, what then was, I guess, more of the beginning of this Kong renaissance. But even in those 5 years, a lot's happened, and he's back with a revised version of his book, greatly expanded. The previous edition came out in 2005, and it stopped just before the release of Peter Jackson's King Kong. So, over 20 years, and we were just talking before we started. We are now in Kong is probably the most prevalent in pop culture that he's probably the most he's been since the 70s. So, Ray, welcome back, and we're excited to learn a little bit more about this new edition of your book and everything that you've been up to.
Great. Well, thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it.
So for people my age, because I am 40, me and Kevin are about 40, and for people my age, your book is where I think a lot of us learned a lot of the behind the scenes about the Kong films. I know, like, for generations before me, the making of 33, it was like a really popular book, and there were others, but for my age group, that was the one that really caught my attention and where a lot of my Kong knowledge came from. So to rehash just the question that we asked you last time, for those that maybe not as familiar, what made you want to write this book in the first place?
Right. Okay. Sure. Well, I've been a Kong fan since I was a kid. I'm a little bit older than you guys. And always loved the film and got caught up very much in the Kong mania of the early and mid 70s because it obviously culminated with the De Laurentiis Kong, but it was everywhere then. There were books, magazines, posters, record albums. The original film kept getting shown on television. So it was a great time to be a Kong fan, and just always loved the films and got interested in behind the scenes of all movies, but especially the first King Kong. Read the great George Turner book, of course, and then about around 2000 or so, I live in LA now. I grew up in New York, and I ran into some people who had worked on the 70s film, and they told me some stuff that I didn't know. I thought I knew a lot, and it just got me thinking that I'd like to start researching that movie a little more in depth. And I thought originally what I'd like to do is a book on the making of that movie that could be a companion to the George Turner book. But the more I got into it, the more I realized if you're going to tell the story of one Kong movie at this point, you really have to put it in context. It really has to be with all the other ones. So then my idea expanded out into let's do all of them, which at that time there were 6, plus, some cartoon shows and things. And so I did all the research and all that. It was mostly a hobby. I thought, well, I'll get to it someday. And, I'll get to the actual writing of it someday. And then Peter Jackson announced his movie. And suddenly there was all this interest in anything about Kong. And I got approached and we set it up. And then that's how the first edition of the book came out.
And stuff about the original movie and I think the 70s version at that point, I mean, were pretty easy to come across. But, when it's like a lot of the sequels always got overlooked. It's like Godzilla, where the original kind of stands on its own in the eyes of normal people. And then there's like everything else. So like, the behind the scenes of King Kong Lives, or, even Son of Kong wasn't that widely known at that point. So yeah, last time you were on, it was like Godzilla versus Kong had just come out. Like it only been out for a couple months, and then the Scream Factory Blu-ray of the '76 version with your commentary had just come out, and so we've been like flooded with Kong stuff ever since.
Yeah.
And you said at that point you still felt like you had a lot of work to do to expand expand the book. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess what was it that made that light bulb go off where it was like, now is the time that I think I gotta update this thing.
Right. Well, the Jackson movie came out, and if anyone looked at the first edition of the book, that had to be ready to go to the printer months before the Jackson book came out. So there's only like 4 or 5 pages in there on that film, and it was mostly from press releases because they weren't doing publicity that early, and there wasn't much available. So I definitely had always had in mind that someday I wanted to do a full chapter on Peter Jackson's movie. But honestly, what probably really set it off in my head was Kong Skull Island had come out, and I knew that Godzilla versus Kong was coming out, and I was sitting in a Broadway theater watching the Kong stage musical, and it dawned on me there's a lot more Kong happening here,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of when I thought I probably need to look into this. It took a couple years to get the publisher to agree. And then we had some issues where the company actually ended up getting sold. So the book ended up taking a little longer to come out than I had originally planned. But I'm kind of glad because it allowed me to do to include Godzilla
Yeah.
times Kong or whatever that is, Godzilla X Kong. And also I got to put a lot of information in about the Joe DeVito publishing franchise.
Mm.
And that I felt was really important to cover that because that's gotten pretty big.
Yeah,
In the
that's
last few
that's
years.
a whole other thing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many Kong things happening at once. Like, uh, you know, when the book was getting delayed a little bit, I was like, well, it's probably because like another movie is gonna be out in like a month.
Right.
So,
Well, right as I handed this one in, they announced the next one that's
right,
coming, and
yeah,
I almost thought, do I wait? But figured
yeah.
better not. Better not.
So were you so you're adding a bunch of material for the new stuff. Were you able to go back and revise a lot of the titles that you previously covered?
Yeah, I actually, the reason the book is called Revised and Updated is because you know, when you do film history of any sort, but especially King Kong, you're always going to learn new things. And I've learned so many new things since the original edition of the book came out about the films that I originally wrote about that I put all of that in there now. I also made a point, I didn't do this in the first time around, but I made a point of really diving into the development of the stories and the screenplays because it, especially it got me thinking. I went to the RKO archives, which are at UCLA, and they have all the original drafts of Kong 33. And I realized the story, the development of the story itself was a story, and did not start out the way that we all maybe thought it did, and it took a lot of interesting turns. And I thought this is really important, so I made sure for each film that I addressed the development of the story. So that's definitely an enhancement as well.
Um, so this is obviously like a big, daunting task is to take this hugely comprehensive volume and update it and revise it. I mean, where do you start? Where to start? Like, how did
Yeah.
what were the first things you did? What was the process like of adding and revising everything that you have in this new version?
Well, I started, I kind of outlined what I wanted to add. Like, I wanted to expand the Peter Jackson chapter. I knew I wanted to address all these new films. I wanted to do the Broadway play, and I wanted to do the Joe DeVito stuff. And so I just made outlines, and then I made a wish list of the people I'd like to talk to from those different productions. And then it became a few months of emailing and letter writing and to see who I could get to talk to. And interestingly enough, when I did the first version, it wasn't all that difficult. This time around, it was much harder to get people to talk. I think the world is just busier,
Hmm.
and I think there's so much tele interviewing going on and everything that I think some people might have been a little burned out on it. I'm not sure, but it was a little more difficult this time. But I started to do interviews, and while that was happening, I went back and started working on revising the original chapters. So I worked on that for probably 6 months, and also did some more additional research into that. By then, I was getting some of the interviews, so I was starting to flesh out the other chapters. And then once the revising of the original material was done, I just sat down and started doing the new chapters, knocking them off one by one.
So you mentioned that last time the big challenge was really kind of getting things out the door in time for the Jackson film. Was there kind of a similar deadline with this one, or was it? You did say that you had more time as more projects kept coming up.
Right. Well, there was a little more time to work on this one. The first one had to be the research I had done for a number of years, but when I actually made the deal to do the book, I had 5 months to write the book. And if you've looked at that first book, that was not easy to do all of that in 5 months. So I had more time to do this one. But then where we ended up, again, I mentioned the publishing company got sold, and in the transition from one company to another, it ended up adding about a year delay to the book coming out.
Mm.
Was it the same publisher that had the first one and they had gotten sold?
Yeah, the
Okay.
first edition was published by Applause, and Applause actually got acquired by a company in between, and then that company got acquired by Bloomsbury, which is a British company, and so now it's officially being put out by Bloomsbury now.
Okay. You mentioned getting new interviews. Were there any interviews that you felt really were able to add a lot of material from the new folks that you were able to get?
Yeah, almost everybody. I did get to speak to the producer and the creator of the Kong puppet for the stage
Mm.
show, and they gave me a lot of great information. 'Cause I didn't know much about that production, and they were very generous with their time. Interestingly, this time around, I got to talk to George. He was credited as George Iasomi in King Kong Lives. He now goes by the name George Antoni, but he's the actor who played Lady Kong in that
Mm.
film.
Mm.
And he was just great. I learned more about that movie. The interesting thing about the first edition of the book, and I think this one, is that a lot of people's favorite chapter is on the movie most people don't like very much, which is King
Right.
Kong Lives. And sometimes the story behind a not good movie is even better. And George Antoni was terrific. He gave me all sorts of insight into aspects of that movie I didn't know. So I'm really indebted to him. He really enhanced that chapter. I think it's even funnier now. So yeah. So,
Another thing that I noticed, well, and we talked about this last time we had you on, is the uh, you definitively state that the Kong spider.
I knew
You
we
knew
were going to
exactly. Yeah,
talk
you knew
about
exactly
this.
what I was going to say. You definitively state that the Kong spider pit scene was not shot, and that is something that people still go back and forth on. I know even our friend Greg Coulon's Willis O'Brien biography, it leans more skeptical, but it does say, like, the script that doesn't have it marked shot might it I think the dates were like September of 32, August or September of 32, but some of the animation was also completed after that, so it's like so there's nothing to support anything anywhere, like, it's just a we'll never know thing, but yeah, you definitively state that there's no real evidence that it was shot, which I'm pretty much inclined to agree with you. Do you think there's any chance, a later script with some more notations
Yeah.
or anything might pop up? That's probably the only thing that'll ever,
I will have you know that after our last interview, I got so many nasty emails from
Oh,
people.
that's what I was gonna say. Like, someone, a couple. I think there's maybe one, maybe more than one, but at least one YouTuber like took like that snippet of audio and made a whole video about like, oh, like, it looks like this, never happened, and like it went. That's not like viral, like, oh, it was the millions of views, but like for like the weird little subcultures of monster fans and stop motion fans that the Facebook groups and the forums and stuff, people lost their minds.
Yes. Somebody got my phone number
Oh my
and
God.
called me and spent a half hour telling me what an idiot I was and how I didn't know what I was talking about. And I was like, okay, this is an interesting response.
Yeah, that is insane. But well, and it almost reminds me. I don't know if I think Kevin knows a little bit because we've mentioned it in like some group chats. But like, Ray, I don't know if you are up to date on your Bigfoot Bigfoot news. There's this documentary that is playing in the festival circuit in which it is more or less confirmed that famous clip of Bigfoot walking was faked.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And like the Bigfoot community is like imploding in on itself. and
I will have to drop in on that.
All these people that like practically made their identity around the this bit of footage, like the denial is up the wall. And it's like, and I feel like that's like we had like a sample of that when in that discussion about that scene. What is it? Do you that's what I wanted to ask is what do you think it is about? Because there's other scenes in that movie and there's other scenes in plenty of other famous movies that are lost or cut. What is it about that specific scene that has like gone into like a full blown urban legend, like this like this pop culture lore that people are so attached to? Like, what is it about that scene that people are so obsessed with?
To be honest, I'm not really sure because but I think it's almost become a religion at this point. But here's what if you take a look at that part of the book this time around, I actually found some additional information in the research this time. So I'm prepared to give a more nuanced explanation that's still going to get to the same place.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I think the fascination with the scene is the way that Forey Ackerman presented it, because he had that that great picture of blurry picture of the spider and hinted at that it was made. The thing that always makes me laugh, and I didn't write this in the book, but I kind of thought about it. Everybody talks about the lost spider pit scene. Nobody talks about the lost tar pit scene.
Right.
I mean, they know about it, but nobody bemoans that. And the lost climb up the mountain scene. And the funny thing is they all kind of went at the same time. What I kind of found out this time, and it added a little bit to it, is that Cooper did shoot the live action material for the sequence. I didn't. What I did is I went deeper into the RKO archives this time. I was only allowed to access certain ones previously. I got to see more of them, and their shooting schedules, and they break down everything that was shot, the day it was shot, what the scene was, and they have a live action production schedule. They don't have the animation production schedule. That's where I think some of the mystery comes from. But essentially, what I have discerned from the research is Cooper did shoot the sailor stuff. It was all of that jungle sequence. As everybody knows, they shot a lot of that for the test. But then right after the movie was approved, Cooper went back to the jungle set and filmed everything else because that set was going to be struck, because it was technically built for the most dangerous game, even though he really built it for Kong. But that he had to get everything done. And in that couple of weeks at the end of June 32, he did film a collection of stuntmen and actors enacting that part of the sequence. By September, with that script that people know about, it had not been shot by September because it would have been marked in the script if it had been. So what you have now is this window of September to December, specifically December 9th, which is the day that Max Steiner first saw the film, and it was not in the film when Max Steiner viewed it. And that is before the San Bernardino preview that everybody talks about, and it's before the RKO board meeting that everybody talks about. By everybody, I mean Cooper, who kept telling all these different stories about what it was. One of the things that did come up in some of the memos that I looked at, Cooper was under tremendous pressure to cut the budget for the animation sequences because it's a special effects picture. Special effects always cost more. Nobody quite knew how much it was going to cost because nobody made a movie on that scale. It was already an expensive movie. The initial budget was twice an A picture in those days for RKO. And essentially he was being pressured to not use animation. They wanted him to put somebody in a Kong suit. They thought, well, maybe we'll do the animation for some of the fight sequences, but otherwise, can we not shoot this maybe with a guy in an ape suit? And that actually had been an idea of Cooper's way back at the beginning. But by the time they got to filming the animation, he did not want to do that because obviously it would not have intercut well and it would not have looked the way he wanted it to look. So instead of, the way you make animation cheaper is you make less of it, and so that's when all of those scenes, because if you look in the script and in the production schedules, most of the live action stuff for all of those scenes, for the tar pit scene and the spider pit scene, and even the jumping from roof to roof scene in New York, they did film the live action material for most of those scenes. But at the animation point, that's when Cooper and O'Brien started to cut it. O'Brien has talked about having, he said when he showed Cooper the first rushes from the spider pit scene, that's when he cut it. Cooper said that in one interview, but then he said a lot of other things in other interviews. Cooper is not a reliable narrator, unfortunately.
And there's that, and then I know apparently O'Brien's wife had said a few times like that he was really proud of the animation in that scene, but
what I think happened, Cooper was so all over that movie. What I think happened was this. There was no way Cooper was not going to look at the material for that sequence until it was finished. What I think happened is O'Brien either shot a test or he shot maybe the first shot of the sequence. And when Cooper saw it, my guess is was already thinking about what he needed to cut. And I do think O'Brien may have completed a shot, and that's when Cooper killed it. The other key piece to me that proves this is if you look at the shooting schedule, the rear screen projection material, most of those shots were not done until the very end of the production schedule, mostly because the animation wasn't ready. So they kind of grouped, like any scene where the humans are interacting with the screens. Most of that was shot at the end of December, beginning of January, end of December 32, beginning of January 33. That sequence would have needed rear screen projection shots in order to meld the live action with the animation, and none were done for that sequence. And plus, they were all done after the scene was already cut because it was at the end of December and Steiner saw it in the beginning of December. When I saw that and I realized when all of that stuff was filmed, I was like, so I will amend. I said definitively last time we talked, it was never shot. I will say it was partially shot, but it was never finished. And it was never finished along with all those other scenes that nobody gets upset and calls me names and yells at me about.
Well, it sounds like at best, maybe like a fraction of a second would have been.
That's yes, pretty much.
Well,
you don't get like angry letters about the alleged secret Japanese ending to King Kong versus
Yes.
Godzilla.
Well, yeah. Speaking, I was gonna say, all good monster movie myths start with Forey Ackerman.
There you go.
He's the one that had the two different endings for King Kong versus Godzilla. Also.
Again, maybe not the most reliable narrator, but what can you do?
And I mean, also with some of these people that were interviewed, like when they were really old, sometimes memory just, like I know I talked to you about some stuff that is corrected in the new version, but like some of the stuff that I think you said it was Arthur Rankin was telling you about King Kong Escapes, and we were like, well, that doesn't sound quite right,
Yeah.
And it even happened to me. I interviewed a few years ago. I interviewed the director of Godzilla Final Wars, who isn't even that like he's probably in like his 50s or something now. And I'd asked him a question about like this. He in an interview around the time that movie was coming out, he said like his original idea was something completely different. And I'd asked him about it, and he was like, "No, I don't know who said that." And like, I had to bite my tongue and be like, "You did,"
Right. Well, the first interview that I ever did for the first edition of the book was Lorenzo Semple, who wrote obviously the script for the 70s Kong. And the first question I asked him was, when did it become the World Trade Center? And he said to me, it was always the World Trade Center. He goes, I think that was actually Dino's first idea about it. It's all well and good till I got my hands on the first draft, Lorenzo's, which is all set at the Empire State Building. So what you kind of learn doing these things, and I'm sure you guys know this, is you interview the people, but then you really do have to research it.
But yeah, I get it though. I mean, like I don't remember what I did at work 2 days ago.
Absolutely, and one of the things that was so great about Marion Cooper is he was a showman, and showmen love to exaggerate. And the other thing that happens is they did plan the scene, they did work on it. So I'm sure someone can think, oh no, we shot that. And they did shoot pieces of it. What they never got to was finishing it, and that's actually just part of movie making. That happens, and it's not really that big of a mystery. The mystery comes from the idea that the scene was completed and cut, so people are desperate to find it floating around somewhere.
Yeah, and then there's people that still like swear up and down they saw it. Ray Bradbury used to say that,
yes,
and Ray Harryhausen used to be sitting right next to him, like, don't
Right.
don't listen to him.
Right. So it's great, but I know after this people are going to yell at me again, so it's okay.
Yeah.
So on the topic of the development of 33, there's a recent Blu-ray release for Ingagi, and they keep saying like in the special features like the inspiration for King Kong. And I know that was like an RKO release, but I know you were looking into like kind of the early drafts and things like that. How much did that actually play into the development?
I think very little, with one exception, which I'll go into, which is I do think the ideas were developed roughly around the same time. I know the Kong taking the girl into the jungle was always part of Cooper's plan, and that's before Ingagi came out. And it was all based off of the Paul Duchelleau, which I probably mispronounced that horribly, his book, which of course has a lot of fantasy in it, even though it's supposed to not be fantasy. I think that was the idea almost from the very beginning, and that's really the thing where it parallels. What did come up, which was kind of interesting, was RKO's legal department got very worried when Ingagi came out, and they actually were suggesting to Cooper that maybe we cut some things. And his response was forget it, because they had two legal controversies. The first one, which is probably a little more plausible, is that RKO got very worried that the jungle scenes were too close to the Lost World. And they actually and then also the Kong coming to New York, the dinosaur comes to New York in the Lost World. So they were kind of encouraging Cooper, can you cut the New York sequence and just end the movie on the beach at Skull Island so that it won't be so much like Lost World? The solution, Cooper actually considered that for a little while, and that's in some of the memos. But then decided, obviously, they didn't want to do that. So they solved that problem by buying the rights to the Lost World, both the film and the book. Ingagi came up, and oh, what's the other film? There's another film that came up at the same time, exotic South Seas kind of stuff. And RKO got worried about those two films. And Cooper at that time said, forget it, I'm not even going to worry about this. And there's actually a line in one of the drafts kind of mentioning, and I'm blanking on what the other film was, but I'll come up with it. But they make fun of, oh, we're going to make a movie like that movie and Ingagi, and they made them take that line out. but it's in one of the drafts. So
that would have been. I mean, it's already a meta movie that would have taken it over the top.
Exactly.
So Kong is back in a huge way right now. I mean, how do you feel like the Monsterverse is held up? And more specifically, what do you feel about? Because I mean, there's definitely a harder pivot between Godzilla 2014 and now. The Monsterverse stuff, I think, has taken a really hard pivot towards being like more children's entertainment. I mean,
absolutely.
What do you have any thoughts on that, or I mean, kids obviously love monsters. That's how we all started liking it. But how do you feel like it's holding up the appeal of Kong as a character well?
I think a bit. I will tell you, I get yelled at about this too. I announced that I was going to be including the legendary films in the book, and you would not believe that, or you might believe, there are a lot of people out there who do not want those films put in with Kong. They call it Kong in name only, and I got yelled at about that too.
Well,
so whatever.
I mean, hey, as fans of all big monsters, I mean, if I pick up a book about the history of Godzilla, I expect the 1998 movie to be covered.
Absolutely.
I think because I just listened to your King Kong Lives commentary recently, also, and I mean that's a movie that, let's face it, is not the greatest. I mean, I like it because it's stupid, but like it's not a good movie.
No, it's
but but at the end you do mention kind of like, no matter how someone feels about a certain entry in a franchise, each thing is a building block to the next thing. And and that's something that, as I've gotten older, has made me like mellow out a little bit on things like remakes of classic or whatever, because it's like, the worst remake or the worst adaptation of something that comes out, there's always going to be someone out there that's going to go check out the original version. It usually means that there's going to be, nice new Blu-rays of the old movies.
Right.
Like that Scream Factory Kong 76 disc probably never would have come out if not for, Godzilla versus Kong being right there. So like it just having the character in the lexicon, I think, is going to bring a lot of people into it. And I have a daughter who has very minimal interest in monster movies, but I have a lot of friends who have kids that, they're little boys and sometimes little girls, they watch Godzilla versus Kong, and then like, their parents are like, hey, let's watch Kong 33. This is where it started. And that, for me, like when I was a kid watching these movies when I was 8 years old, like I didn't care that they were in black and white. I didn't care that the special effects weren't the same as something like Jurassic Park. I just wanted to see monsters doing cool stuff, and that's kind of what hooks us for life, right?
I feel like with the legendary ones, especially the last two, I feel like Kong Skull Island's kind of a island of its own to some extent, because they make such radical changes to the character and to the tone in the next two movies. But I feel like when I was a kid, you would wait, because that was pre-home video, you would wait desperately for them to show 33, and they would show it maybe once or twice a year. So it was a big event. The ones that sustained the popularity, because they were on all the time, was King Kong versus Godzilla and King Kong Escapes. Certainly nowhere near the original in quality, but definitely fun Saturday afternoon movies that if you're a kid, you're going to watch those while you're waiting for the other one back then, right? I feel like the last two legendaries, they're not really to my taste particularly, but I remember seeing the last one in the theater, and I was surrounded by families and kids, and they were loving it. And my thought is, good, this is their generation's King Kong versus Godzilla and King Kong Escapes.
And those kids, a lot of them are going to go And
Yeah.
I mean, these days it's, they'll probably pop on whatever, it's HBO Max or whatever, and
Right.
I want to go watch all the old ones. That's how it's been with a lot of kids. They just want to see more when they see the new thing.
Yeah, and as
Um,
you said, every time one of these comes out, more stuff comes out. So I think it does sustain it. I
yeah,
think they're different. I think and I said this in the book. I don't actually think the character is the same Kong.
right.
It feels more to me like an Edgar Rice Burroughs kind
Mhm.
of thing now. And again, it's not. I like the originals. I'm more in that camp. But I have no problem with people having
Yeah.
their generation's version of it. So
It
that's
it
fine.
would be cool to see like a more monstrous Kong that is biting
Yeah.
people in half or whatever again. That's
Yeah.
one of the cool things. Like, did you get a chance to see Godzilla -1?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, what did you think of that?
I loved it. I thought it was
Yeah.
great.
But yeah,
Mhm.
but that's one of the cool things with Godzilla being an international property now, is like they can do a more serious, scary version, and then here we have the lighter,
Yeah.
more kid-friendly thing. But I mean, I look, at this point, I think it's safe to say they're going to be making Kong movies long after all of us are dead,
Most
So
likely.
there
Yeah.
will be more horrific versions, and like we're just in the current version right now. That's
Right,
kind
right.
of, like every generation has their own Batman actor, their own Spider-Man actor, or whatever. In 20 years, you're going to be putting out a third version of this book that's going to cover probably a whole other cycle of movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for better or worse, we're going to just keep having this stuff until the end of time.
But it is great because it's something that I did notice in maybe before the legendary movies got started. Like for all of the ballyhoo, the Peter Jackson film actually kind of underperformed a bit, as
Hmm.
you know, and it did seem like people were not quite as excited by the idea of Kong. I think that kind of affected it a little bit, and I felt like Kong Skull Island had a little bit of that problem too. Like I think it did okay, but I think it didn't quite generate enthusiasm. These last two, which are cartoons, um, people really like. I mean, they were very successful during the
Yeah.
pandemic when Godzilla versus Kong, and this last one was a huge hit. They hit a sweet spot with current audiences,
Yeah.
and
And I think it is,
yeah,
the more people that are bringing their kids, that's
yeah,
instead of one ticket for one, two tickets for a couple, you're looking at 3, 4, 5 tickets sold for
yeah,
mom, dad, and the kids.
yeah.
So and also I think now like that also gives them more uh uh stock in selling more toys, and that's keeping keeping
Mhm.
that revenue stream going.
Yeah, yeah, and as you said, keeping the character in the consciousness.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting. Like working on this new edition, it some of the folks I was working with are younger, and that's the only Kong they know. They
Hmm.
don't really they don't know the De Laurentiis one, and I think they all know who the character from 33 is, but I don't know how many younger people have actually seen it
Right.
because they don't watch black and white movies or
Yeah.
something. Is what I keep hearing. So
Speaking of Kong's kind of like character pivots, one of the things we were kind of hypothesizing in the group chat was that right after the Peter Jackson movie dropped is the Me Too movement, and suddenly Kong is no longer damseling women left and right.
Mhm.
Do you think that's a
yeah.
component of that?
I think so. I know. I interviewed Max Borenstein, who wrote Kong Skull
Mhm.
Island, and he said that from the very beginning of conceiving that movie, they wanted to stay away from damsels in distress, and they wanted to stay away from the element of Kong falling in love with the girl. They just didn't want to even go near it, and his opinion was it wouldn't play today.
Mhm.
So.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
Um,
I guess my next kind of question I wanted to touch on is you mentioned that you saw the Broadway show.
Yes.
Um, it seemed like to me that one uh, it wasn't playing from my perspective, it didn't seem like it was playing for a very long time. It seemed like it kind of came and went very quickly. Did that seem like that was something that was echoed by the sentiments of the people that you talked to, either on the New York side or the Australia side or anything along those lines?
Yeah. Well, because I noticed that too when I was looking at it. It ran about 9 months, which actually isn't a 5-year run, but it's not the worst run either. I think they were happy with its performance in New York, if not over the moon. The biggest problem with the New York one was the reviews were terrible.
Mhm.
And that did seem to impact them more than the length of the run. When I was
Yeah.
talking to the producer, she kind of, I think, was not, she wasn't angry about the reviews at all. I think she was more like, she sort of agreed with them to a point,
Mhm.
but felt bad about it,
Yeah.
and that one is interesting because it radically changed. The one that they put on in Australia was much closer to the film. I don't know if either of you guys saw the Broadway version.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance
I
to.
didn't make it out there.
Yeah, the Australian version was fairly close to the movie with a couple of tweaks. When they brought it to Broadway, they really radically changed it. So about the only thing that's really the same is that there's a lead character named Anne, and they do, Denham is like an evil villain character. I mean, a little more like Fred Wilson. But all the rest of it's gone. The natives were gone. The sacrifice was gone. He does fight the giant snake, just like in the '70s Kong. Um, but it just didn't work. Like, I think they had taken so many elements out of it. Like, they didn't want her to be a damsel in distress, so they got rid of the Jack character altogether. He's not in it, so she saves herself, which wasn't maybe a bad idea. But they got rid of it. It was more like the Peter Jackson Kong, a little more Mighty Joe Young than
Mhm.
King Kong. And then the songs were just not good.
Yeah.
The puppet's great, and they did some great stagecraft visuals. There's a sequence where he's running through the jungle, and they did it with video projections and the puppet, and then they repeat it. He's running through Manhattan. That was brilliant. But the show itself, the fact that it ran as long as it did, I think, was pretty impressive because wasn't the best show, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, all the reviews I said were just like, well, the puppet's really cool.
And it really was, I will say.
I actually thought it was kind of inspired to cast a black actress as Anne because it takes the intentional or unintentional weirdness out of
Yes.
out of that dynamic. But
Yeah. And the actress, her name was Christiane Pitts, and she was very good. It was sort of, the material wasn't that hot, but she did as good as she could have. So
Was the Cooper estate involved in that production?
yeah, it's, you get into that, all that Cooper rights stuff. They didn't have to get the estate's approval because they officially say it's based on the novel,
Mhm.
but they wanted it, so they approached the Cooper estate. It was completely endorsed by them.
That's
And
probably just like, a little PR boost.
yes,
kind of.
yeah, it helps. It helps.
Well, that we're gonna use that as a segue into, yes, when it comes to Kong, a very cursed topic, the frustrating and confusing case of the rights to King Kong, which I think last time we were talking about it, and we were like, yeah, there's stuff we still don't know.
Yeah.
So okay, so I'm gonna start, like, this is gonna be like a Kong licensing lightning round. So
Okay.
I'm gonna start, though, to your understanding in 2026 as we speak. What is the situation with the rights to King Kong?
Okay. Um, RKO, which is still a company, owns the rights to the first film and Son of Kong. So if you want to remake either of those movies, you have to go to them. Studio Canal in France owns the rights to the two De Laurentiis pictures. So if you want to do anything from those pictures, you have to go to them because they acquired his company. The rights to the story as published in the novel is in the public domain. So anybody can do a version of that. What you cannot include are any elements unique to either of the Dino Kong or the original Kong, which is why Peter Jackson's version doesn't have a subway sequence in it, because that's unique to the film. The play and the Cooper estate owns the publishing rights to the story. This is where it gets confusing. I don't know how you have publishing rights to a story that's in the public domain. And that comes out of that very odd ruling that the judge made in 1976, where he said, the book is in the public domain, but you guys own the rights. So, but anyway, the Cooper estate zealously exploits and enforces those rights and they do that mostly now through Joe DeVito's work. Right. And so all of those publications are copyrighted by the estate. And then the last category is they said all rights to the character, which I only take mostly as the merchandising rights belong to Universal.
Okay. And that's where it gets weird, because okay, it's like, okay, Universal owns the rights to the character, supposedly.
Yes.
So I mean, if they can't remake the old movie. So I get why they had to use the public domain thing for the Jackson movie. But this is where everything gets so confusing, and I don't know, and no one knows what's going on, is when you look at all the other things that are going on. Because, like, for instance, like not the Monsterverse stuff. That's a whole other thing that we'll get into in a minute. But like in the 2000s, there was the Kong animated series, and then there was the Netflix Kong King of the Apes. Like, is that something where they had to consult Universal? Is it something where can they take the public domain status of a character from a public domain novel and use that as a loophole? That's where a lot of my confusion comes from.
Right. I think technically, and I'm not a lawyer, but technically, I think you can do anything you want with the Kong character since the novel is in the public domain. However, if you do something, like if you make your own Kong model or something, Universal might give you a hard time. And maybe they have the right to do that, and maybe they don't. The problem is the lawsuit. In order to figure it out, they can afford that more than you can. So I think that's kind of how that unfolds.
And when it comes to the Monsterverse stuff in the new book, you say that they typically just go with Kong to keep it out of contention with RKO.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What would they have to really, I guess, be worried about RKO coming after them for something?
Well, one of the questions that came up in the 70s lawsuits was the title registered with RKO, because the movie was made under 4 different names. It was made under Kong, then the Beast, then the Eighth Wonder, and then back to Kong. And it only became King Kong right at the last minute when David O. Selznick, I think it was like January of 1933. And so there was just a question, well, can we use the title King Kong? And that's where the whole Legend of King Kong stuff came from and all of that. So I think just for safety's sake, if you notice, most any Kong thing done that isn't officially connected with RKO tends to be called Kong rather than King Kong, including a lot of the merchandise. Officially, I don't think it's a problem.
Okay.
But I think everybody just wants to avoid more lawsuits.
I know. We talked to an author, Greg Keyes, who writes most of the adaptations of the Monsterverse movies, and he said, like, they told him, don't say King Kong.
Yeah.
He was like, they didn't really tell me why. They just said, like, don't do it. And then, like, to make matters even more confusing is, like, there have been, like, Monsterverse, like the pop vinyl figure. The box to that says King Kong. and it's like, okay, well, when can you do it? When can't you do it?
Right.
It
Well,
seems like some
also,
regions it's also different, right? So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because in Japan, I think Kong Skull Island was called King Kong Skull Island. So yeah, different
Yeah.
territories seem to have different rules, and I think the reason, like Ray kind of said, I think the reason we might not know is because no one has, like, everyone's played it so safe that nothing has come up.
when I was
You know?
doing the original version of the book, I talked to somebody at Warner Brothers, and this was the response I got. I said, "Can you help me understand the King Kong rights?" And they went, "Ugh." And that was that was the only response that I got. Yeah. The other thing too is it also depends on who licenses it, because and this, you want to get it even weirder, okay? RKO, the existing company, owns the rights to the movie. Distribution rights to the original movie, belong to Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And that's from all of the Turner and everything else. So they will license things. Most of the time, if you see something licensed as King Kong with an Art Deco, that kind of arcing letters,
Mhm.
that usually comes somewhere through the Warner Brothers, Turner, RKO rights. If you see something merchandised as King Kong, the Eighth Wonder of the World, or Kong, the Eighth Wonder of the World, that's Universal. The Todd McFarlane stuff, that was from Turner at the time, so now Warner Brothers. I don't really know. Like, I think some of the other model stuff is independent, and they're just hoping nobody sues them. I don't know.
Yeah, even
You know,
like when I was like, this was like this, so this had to have been like 1994, 1995. I used to collect like the Japanese Godzilla figures from Bandai, and they did one of the 62 Kong from King Kong versus Godzilla, and the tag on that figure, it had a little Turner sticker on it.
Yes. Yeah.
So even that version had to be merchandised through them for a
Yeah.
Japanese figure for a Toho movie, and then Universal owns the rights to the United States only rights to King Kong versus Godzilla,
And King Kong Escapes.
Yeah, and King Kong Escapes, and Toho has the rights for basically every other territory on Earth. And I also noticed that, like, some of the cameos, like Space Jam 2 or the Lego Movie or Ready Player One, those are all Warner Brothers movies that instead of just that they all say King Kong instead of Kong.
Right.
So I don't know if that's
can.
also connected to them having the RKO library.
Again, that weirdness where RKO owns the movie, but Warner's owns the They both own it together. You can't do one without the other. And Warner Brothers is the one who will come down on you. Like,
Yeah.
RKO, I'm not even sure. I think it's an office with a couple of people now, so I don't think it's that big. But no, it's a little, and the whole Monsterverse thing.
Well, that makes it even weirder because those are Warner Brothers movies. I know originally it was at Universal,
right?
But that makes it even weirder because it seems like if anyone could do it, they could do it.
Yeah,
we have to wait for someone to get sued before we know answers at this point.
I sort of think that's the case. Like, again, all of the weirdness comes from those 1976 decisions where it's in the public domain, but it's not. And at that point, I still don't quite understand how the Cooper estate has anything, but they do. So,
Yeah, and it's just like when they always say character rights with Universal, I think of like, okay, like that means Universal has to get something out of something, but but also it sounds like there might be other parties, like some of those, like, some of the more low budget cartoons or something from the 2000s that might have just made a thing called Kong, and
yes,
okay, I guess like, can I just make a movie with a giant ape called Kong and no one will do anything? Like,
I think if you stay within the parameters of the novel,
yeah,
I think, I wish I could be more clear with you, but this is about as clear as I can get. So
yeah, this is going to continue to be the most baffling thing. Like, every time I think I have an understanding of it, something happens and that like blows it apart.
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
much.
Well, because it's all, and also it's who is doing stuff. Universal, for the most part, seems to exploit the rights mostly like in merchandise in their stores and
Yeah, and like
things.
for the rides and
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
stuff
and
like
all of
that.
that, and they can make the ride because they own the character. I mean, they don't have to pay anybody to do that. So I think that's mostly where you get the Universal stuff. Almost anything movie related is probably Warner Brothers in some form. Like I think the whenever you see the DVDs and all of that stuff, all of that has to go through Warner Brothers because that's all technically distribution. So
So, like, hypothetically, if somebody wanted to do a movie adaptation of the Joe DeVito book, they would have to get all of those parties involved.
well, no, that's a good question.
There's been
I should
some attempts to
ask him.
make to do TV series from that. I
There,
think
there,
right now, I don't know if there's any traction on it, but I think the last one I heard was James Wan was doing something with it with Disney Plus, but that was like years ago. I don't think I've heard any updates since then.
the DeVito stuff is being developed right now. They did it. They had two previous attempts that didn't go. I know they are working on something now. Um, Again, it's tricky. I think if you license the DeVito stuff and you stay within those parameters, I think you only need his permission. I think if you go outside of that is where you would run into trouble.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's like there's all these splinter factions, and it seemed like they had at the time of the lawsuit their parameters were established, but
Yeah.
like the Cooper estate has the rights to publishing. Well, except we're getting all these novelizations through Titan and like the comic
Yeah.
books for the Monsterverse things and things like that, which are
Well, the comic books, all the current stuff is in some way or another coming from the DeVito version of things. Like that. That's where a lot of the licensing is coming from, other than in something related to the Monsterverse, which is their own thing.
right.
But like all the crossover, the Planet of the Apes and all that, that's
Mhm.
all on the DeVito line.
Yeah. And I've seen that that has its own video games and
Yeah.
special toys and all sorts of other things along those lines too. So
Yeah.
it's
No,
it's its own sub franchise.
it is, and that's why I wanted to make sure to cover it pretty thoroughly because it was actually bigger than I realized,
Mhm.
and he does a good job of maintaining it and growing it, and I believe he is the de facto representative for the Cooper estate now. So, and he's like pretty much they have. Again, legally, I'm not quite sure how it works out, but he is the person who gets to use those publishing rights, and he does very well with it.
Yeah, they're still they're still doing stuff with that too. I think I don't know if it's still going, but I think this year or last year there was a comic book that Alex Cox, the guy that made Repo Man, was writing.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
wasn't aware of that one, but okay.
yeah, and then there was right now IDW is doing a thing with the Rocketeer going to Skull Island, and
I'm not sure if that's like an official one or if that's one of those, it's just an island with a giant ape on it.
yeah,
What are they saying? The Simpsons, Ape Island. What's it?
yeah,
Yeah. But like the Tarzan and the Doc Savage novels, that's all through the
yeah.
DeVito line as well too. So they plumb the literary waters pretty well with it all.
Speaking of like kind of weird sublines, it seemed like there was some sort of creative connective tissue between like the 90s animated series and that Kong King of the Apes on Netflix. Were you able to like track down some of the people who worked on that at all, or?
I didn't get to talk to anybody directly, but yeah, the one of the Netflix series is technically in a chain of rights a remake of the 90s one. So yeah, it's I'm sorry, the 2000s one.
Yeah.
It's actually the same producer, I think, I believe. And so yeah, that DNA is all the same, basically.
Yeah, I noticed like that had some of the similar music motifs and things like that, going from one to the other. And then along those lines, Netflix then turned around and made a completely different Kong animated thing. And that, I mean, that's technically a Monsterverse thing, but it feels very kind of divorced from the rest of it. Was that always supposed to have been a Monsterverse thing, or did the
I believe it was initiated by the Monsterverse people. I'm not really sure about the like why they're. I think they're keeping it in a lane. It's a little bit like the Star Trek in the movies, Star Trek on TV stuff, where
right,
they can use certain things and they can't use other things, and why that's the case, that I do not know. But volume 3, I'll do that.
Yeah,
Figure all of that out.
and then that didn't get any other seasons, so they I don't know if they're still doing it, but I know they were continuing it as a comic book.
Yeah. I think they were trying to just keep the Monsterverse alive in between movies. And the thing is, the last one, I'm blanking, Godzilla times Kong.
New Empire,
was supposed to be the last one, but it did so well.
Right, yeah.
So I think they were concluding everything, and then it was like, oh no, let's keep it going, which is why you have the Apple TV series and all that. Keep it alive.
Yeah. Well, at the time, we thought Godzilla versus Kong was going to be the last one, and then they were like, "Oh, well." And then, like, originally they were saying, "Well, we're going to do a Kong sequel," because it sounds like Toho was dragging their feet on re-upping their license, and then they were like, "Oh, well, actually, yeah, Godzilla, yeah, you can do it." And then now Godzilla's like, he's so separate from the rest of that movie.
He's kind of his own little subplot for exactly that reason. They didn't get the rights until very late in the day, and then there's the whole Mothra thing. So it's the rights thing is interesting. Everybody's fighting about everything.
And I know in recent years, things have been, the Toho Kong has had sort of a decreased presence, and I know that in even in some Japanese publications, like we know the guys that, I don't know if you've seen it, but you reference the Ishiro Honda biography in your bibliography from a few years ago, and Ed and Steve, the writers of that, we know those guys, and they also just put out this big, like, Godzilla 70th anniversary guidebook, and like again, this is just like with how complicated the Kong stuff can be. Like, at the very last minute, their publisher told them they can use photos from that movie, but they can't use any that show Kong, because they'd have to get another special clearance from Universal. And so it seems like that is also starting, the waters are starting to get muddy with that now too.
Well, how the two 60s films were done were on a 5-year license.
Yeah.
So they had a license from RKO, and they could do King Kong versus Godzilla. And then if they got another movie started within 5 years, they could do a second one. And it's a little more convoluted how King Kong Escapes came out. But that's
because that's Rankin Basket's involved.
Right. Well, they were sort of for hire at that point.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I know when that 5-year license ran out, there was always some question: could Toho use their versions without getting permission, since they were now, and they have always opted not to.
Yeah.
And now, that was also when the companies were smaller. Now that everybody's owned by giant conglomerates, I'm sure Toho doesn't want the headache.
Yeah. Well, speaking of more of your work, I'd mentioned, I just recently listened to your King Kong Lives commentary, but that was, I just remember you saying, because I was like, well, where's the King Kong Lives disc? And you were like, well, just hold on a second. Like, just wait a few months. So that came out. So, I mean, how did you get rope? How did that fall into your lap? And I mean, for that commentary, did you do any new research or preparation to get that track put together?
Well, the thing is, I did the 76 commentary was for Shout Factory, and when I talked to you and when I said wait a few months, they were going to do one.
Yeah. We did notice
Yeah.
Like when you go to King Kong Lives on like any of the streaming sites, it says it's under license by Shout Factory, and it's like, well, why not just put out a
Yeah.
Blu-ray? So yeah, so I got the Umbrella one. But...
Yeah, well, Umbrella's the only one that's out right now. For reasons I'm not privy to, Shout Factory has not moved forward with their version. They did talk to me about doing a commentary for it, but it just never came to be. And then about a year later, Umbrella Factory got in touch with me, and they're Australian. And originally, I think it was only supposed to be in Australia. I think technically it is. Like, I think
Yeah.
anything we get here is an import. I didn't do any necessarily new research from the material I have now. It's new research from the 2005 edition of the book, but I had been in the middle of talking to the people that I talked to update it. So anything on that commentary includes the new stuff as well. So
yeah. Yeah, I like the only thing I could think of is like maybe they just, they know the movie's reputation isn't that great, but like when you look at their catalog of stuff, that doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't seem like it's something they usually
well, I'll tell
are
you,
worried about.
it's a nice package for a movie that I
Oh
don't
yeah,
think has a great reputation. I'm not sure what made them decide they wanted to put it out. It's weird. I was more heavily involved in the Shout Factory. The Umbrella one, they got in touch with me and I did it for them, but it was kind of like I did it and mailed it off to them, and that's the only involvement I had in it. I'm a little more familiar with what went on with the Shout Factory disc because I was again a little more involved in that.
right.
So I'm not really sure. I'm not sure what Umbrella was thinking, but I'm glad it's out anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that may be the only one you're ever going to get of that, unless Shout Factory goes ahead.
It's an all-region disc, so it can play anywhere. But I don't know. I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, as just an enthusiastic fan, even the movies that aren't the best, I want to have them on my shelf for whatever reason.
The making of that movie fascinates me endlessly.
Yeah. Well, everything about it is just, I mean, it's a really strange and demented movie on its own, but just everything about its existence is weird. It came out so long after the other one, and plot wise, it's just like one of the more bizarre sequels probably out there. And it's one of those movies that you watch and like every decision that's made, you're like, I wonder just why.
It's funny. Like Dino was very enthusiastic about Kong. I don't know always how much he understood about Kong,
right?
But I mean, like he always wanted to bring it back, and they had a couple of different ideas, but his rule was he didn't want to do Son of Kong. He wanted it to still be King Kong. And of course, the problem is he dies at the end of the first film. So that was always the struggle. So I think any story they finally came up with was always going to be a little weird, because how do you explain him coming back to life, not only after being shot, but also having all of his bones crushed when he fell, which they don't address in the movie. He also has an open heart transplant, and then you never see a scar on his chest for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
So whatever. But it's interesting because it was, I think you had a disengaged director.
Yep.
And you had Rambaldi working without Baker, and I think that was a problem too. So
yeah, there's a lot of stuff. A lot of the stuff that went into the prestige of the 76 one is gone, and you're left with this kind of weird, almost like 80s grindhouse kind of version
direct-to-video
of King Kong. That is sort of a comedy, but but only when it wants to be, and it's the whole thing. And I like I said, I don't know that I like it for all the right reasons, but
hey, it's still a Kong movie.
I was just like when I was watching it again with your commentary on, the whole time I was just thinking like, I forgot how like this look of like perpetual disgust that's on Linda Hamilton's face
totally
the whole time.
Yeah, she did not want to be there.
But it's a fun watch. I don't know that it's in the ways that it was meant to be. But
Yeah, probably not. But it has a great. It's not really its opening shot, but that first bit where they reveal him in the operating room, like that had some sweep to it, and you thought, gee, maybe if the rest of the movie had that sweep. But I think too, you had that thing going on in the '80s where you had sort of the Batman problem where people would do these genre films, and of course the genre films were getting bigger in terms of budgets and things, but they just still couldn't quite take them seriously.
yeah,
So you had a lot of like all that, like after the '89 Batman, when every actor in the world was playing a villain and camping it up, like they couldn't quite say, let's do this
yeah,
seriously.
yeah. Well, yeah. It's like we'll pick a like. I think like the intent of the script of it being more like tongue in cheek could have worked. Like if they went all in on it, the way that like when you watch a movie like RoboCop or something
Yeah.
like that, like someone like Paul Verhoeven probably could have made something amazing out of that.
Well, something that Ron Shusett said when I talked to him, which I thought was an interesting point, he and his writing partner wrote it not as a spoof. He kept saying that they were using Raiders as their model, which was like a movie that was an action movie but also sort of a parody of an action
Mm,
movie. I'm not sure I agree with that interpretation, but that was his point. So yes, a little bit tongue in cheek, but I also hear that like for Gillerman, he was shooting it straight,
right.
and the actors, I don't think I knew what they were gonna do. I always, my favorite character in that movie is the John Ashton
Oh
character,
yeah.
because he's got this raging, screaming hatred for the Kongs that is never explained. He just hates them, you know, and and you're like, why do you hate them so much? But you know,
Um. Well, I think we're kind of winding down. I mean, getting back to the book for a minute first. I mean, so there's obviously a whole bunch of new stuff in there. In going through this second edition, there any was there any new information you learned that you thought was like especially surprising, or any favorite new pieces of info that you found in getting this one ready?
well, the thing I like the most in the chapter on 33 is I was able to finally read all the original screenplays. So I feel like I think I've written a really good section on how the story developed. And to me that's sort of the newest thing, because you don't see a lot about that. And I didn't know much about it until you actually have the scripts in your hands. That was fascinating to me. So I think there's things like that. I think the development of the stories, especially for 33 and 76 and for 2005, I feel like is stuff you're not going to get anyplace else.
Hmm.
And I feel good about that. There's little bits all through it. I still get the biggest kick out of the King Kong Lives chapter, just because when I started talking to more people, they had even more bizarre stories to tell. So if you thought the chapter in the first version was amusing, you will be even more amused this time around. And I'm glad I was able to cover the other stuff too, especially all of the new material to play, and also I have several other. There have been several plays. I don't
Yeah.
know how well
Yes,
known.
some of them I didn't know even existed. Like there's earlier attempts and
Yeah,
stuff like that I didn't know about.
I tell you, there's one that they put on every summer in Fullerton, California, and I had heard about it, but I hadn't seen it, and I finally got a chance to see it last summer, and so it got into the book. They did a great job. It's a little tiny theater, but they do some amazing visuals with it, and it's tongue in cheek, but it's respectful tongue in
Hmm.
cheek. Not it's not like I'm not a big fan of camp, because I think it kind of puts the material down. These guys just have fun with it. So I'm glad to have all that in there, because I think Kong fans like to know about, all the minutia stuff as well as the big stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No. I mean that's one of the things. Like you know, it's easy to find information about like Kong 33, but yeah, you aren't gonna find a book that goes into the DeVito stuff,
Yeah.
or you know um the Broadway version, or I mean, even English language material on the Toho films isn't super heavy, So no, I mean, it really is, as of right now, it's the most comprehensive guide to all things Kong. Of course, in like 2 years, there's probably going to be, another TV series, another movie, another, so, but hey, this is going to keep you working, because it's not slowing down. I think we all thought, I think it was going to slow down a little after 2021, and it's only just been more and more
I'd be very curious to see where it all goes, but the goal here was to create as definitive as I could. And I feel like if you got the first version, there's more in here. I think you'll find more value.
Oh yeah, it's easily this is an easy, like, if you're thinking, well, I already got the first one, and I'm not usually the person that upgrades when it's like there's enough material added to this that it could have been another book at this point. So
it almost feels like a new book.
It's well worth updating it in your book collection, I think. And Ray, congrats on getting it done. I mean,
thank you.
This is a daunting task that it is, you were game for it and you did it. It would have been very easy to just be like, oh, I already crossed that bridge 20 years ago. But as a Kong fan, it's important for us to, have these, especially like for me, I do a podcast. I like to know what I'm talking about. I like to have good resources for things,
Altogether, it's not like, digging through, 300 different sources because one person's already compiled it for you. So
right, yeah.
Very appreciated.
Thank you. And I really enjoy your guys' podcast. I listen to it quite a bit.
Awesome. Thank you.
You guys do a great job. So thank you.
Well, is there anything now that you've got all the Kong out of your system, anything else that you're working on that you might want to plug or talk about?
Well, there is something, but I can't say it right now. But
okay. Book.
I'll try, it's another book.
Another book. Okay.
In the same vein, and I will let you know next year because it'll probably come out towards the end of next year. We'll see with the publisher, but I will give you advance notice.
All right.
I just can't say about it now. That's all.
Okay.
So,
and for people out there, what's a good place to keep up on your projects online, social media, anything?
Sure. I have a Facebook page called King Kong History of a Movie Icon, so they can go there, and just King Kong Movie Icon on Instagram. And I have a website, raymorton.com, which has updates on all of this stuff as well, so people can go there. And they're free to contact me. Just please don't yell at me.
Please stop yelling at this man about the spider pit, okay?
Exactly.
All right, Ray. Well, it's been a blast again having you, and you're always welcome.
Thank you.
And hopefully everyone out there checks out the book. I'm really impressed with it. You did a great job.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah,
it was
for
great,
sure.
great hanging out again.
Yep. Thanks, Ray. Right. Yeah. And everyone out there, thank you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Kaiju Transmissions podcast. Please take a moment to rate and review us on iTunes, Podbean, and Stitcher. Make sure to subscribe for all the latest episodes. You can also check us out on Twitter at KT_podcast. You can check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Kaiju Transmissions. And you can email us at kaijutransmissions@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments. And we will see you next time.